extremely friendly to Jews. Like that was one of the biggest hubs for Jews, is Baku, Makhachkala, Dagestan. Like there's a lot of and they call them mountain Jews, but
Did they coincide and live with the Muslim population in peace?
yeah, totally. It was actually probably one of the most symbiotic relationships there.
So we didn't do a formal introduction. It's October 30th. My flag will fly until this war is over. Hamas is eradicated, and Jews can walk in peace anywhere in the world. But we're on the day after a horrific event that happened in Makhachkala, Dagestan, where modern day pogrom was about to occur, where Jews were not allowed to disembark on an airplane because of their religion, strictly and only. It had nothing to do with land claims and any of that shit. And what I was saying to Taco, and I will explain why I said that, is that my grandmother during World War II was sheltered by a Muslim family that took their own lives into their own hands, by a story she tells me in Makhachkala. And my, how the world has turned. You're from that region, aren't you, originally?
Yes, yeah, I was born in Baku in Azerbaijan.
How ironic.
I mean, timely, I guess. It's Jews have always lived in harmony with the local population. It's always been, there's always, the undertones of anti-Semitism that happen all across the former USSR, but for the large majority of it, Jews and Muslims, and especially in Azerbaijan, because most of the Muslims were completely secular, it wasn't an issue. And
define secular.
They're religious in terms of following Islam, but it's not traditional and holidays and things like that. But the extremism that you see in other countries is not like that. So I would say they're the Muslim equivalent of Jews in Israel. So just like Israelis are progressive Jews, it's a Jewish country, but it's progressive. It's for most intents and purposes secular in the sense of you can practice whatever religion you want, nobody's going to touch you, and you can be any type of sect of Judaism, nobody's going to bother you. And so very similarly, Azerbaijan is just like that as well, meaning that until 1987, you could have been Armenian too, and living in Azerbaijan in perfect harmony. In fact, there were a lot of mixed marriages there too.
And then what happened?
And then there was a civil war that erupted over Nagorno-Karabakh, which is basically a mountain enclave inside of Azerbaijan. I'm not going to get into politics of it because I'm sure there are opposing views, but generally speaking, the land has always belonged to Azerbaijan. It was populated by Armenians, and so one day they wanted to separate and join Armenia, essentially, and that led to a civil war and a lot of, call it ethnic cleansing, that ended up happening in both countries, in Armenia and Azerbaijan. It was very, very scary, very, very sad, and that ultimately pushed my family to immigrate to Canada.
What a fucking violent, disgusting, vile species we can be.
Yeah.
And then we find teams to justify, gods to pray to that we justify, and then we reverse engineer slaughter of human beings under the premise of, I belong to this team or that team, and I'm by no means an atheist. I'm also not a religious person by any stretch. But what the actual fuck are we doing? Because we can see what would be an escalated war knocking at our doorsteps, and modern warfare is one that will reset the clock on everybody.
Sure.
It's horrible. But before, I didn't want to jump into it like that, but the conversation started. For those of you listening, you heard me say the word taco. This is Daniel Abramov, one of my dearest friends, someone that I've known since I can remember, basically. A good friend, a brother. We've been in each other's weddings and cried at each other's sorrows, and we've known each other since forever. He is now in Florida, and I really wanted to ask your perspective as a Canadian now in Florida, are you uncomfortable with speaking your mind about Canadian politics or anything of the sort with all the censorship that's gone on in Canada?
Sorry, repeat the question.
Are you
in Canada?
So you're a Canadian in the United States.
Yeah.
Are you afraid to talk to me about any single topic because you're afraid of backlash or censorship?
No. No, not scared of discussing anything. I mean, I'm also one of those personalities that's not scared of hanging his McGinn David inside of his car and leaving for a week and not giving an F for.
You can swear.
Oh, okay. Not giving a fuck about anybody who has a problem with it. So I've never been one to kind of shy away from being who I am and having an opinion. Now, censorship during COVID was strong. And I'm not afraid of taking a stance and being able to speak my mind ever. Now, I actually mentioned it to a friend of mine that's here in Florida as well, and you feel safer here, just generally speaking.
Really, with all the guns running around? And
Yeah,
stuff like that?
it's funny because everyone's carrying, and it's actually. It's culture shock when you see someone coming up to you and just like casually. I was renting a car from a gentleman, and he had 2 rounds of magazines on one side and gun holsters on the other side, and it's totally normal, right? Super nice guy, and it took me a second. I was like, all right, cool, whatever. It's just it's like a pen. So, it's. I don't feel unsafe at all.
Why do you feel safer here than you do in Toronto? What's going on?
The tension, the environment in Toronto is a lot more tense than it is here.
In what way?
You feel all of the world events, the tension of the world events around Toronto a lot more, and it's interesting because maybe that's just my perspective, but my dad took down his mezuzah from his house because he was
did.
Yeah,
fucking coward.
I found out recently.
Coward.
That's what he decided to do.
Coward.
I wasn't going to call him names, but
I'm going to call him names, and I know your dad, and I'm also going to play the other side of the fence where he's closer to family members that have been through war and seen the Holocaust and stuff like that, and he's probably easing on the side of caution.
No.
But I think that's where the mistake lies. I mean, but we all have our perspective, and in the end, we are all Jews.
Yep.
So, but he's a fucking coward.
Look, I'm not going to pass. Like I said, I'm not passing judgment on anyone. I'm just saying that if you wanted to have a comparison of the sense of environment of Toronto versus Florida, or at least the parts of Florida that I've been to, it's you don't feel that level of anti-Semitism. And it's
you
scary.
feel and you see have you encountered any specific anti-Semitism in Toronto?
I mean, yeah, since York University, you encounter anti-Semitism.
So I was curious whether you were going to say that because I didn't remember in my head where you went. You were like a perpetual student for quite a while.
Indeed, I was.
You were one of those guys that loved to hit the books, and I was like, get me the fuck out of school. York University is in the heart of Toronto in North York, and was a predominantly Jewish university just by geography.
No, it was Jewish funded too. There
Was it? I didn't know that.
There was a lot of Jewish funders, a lot of organizations that were funding the university. In fact, to the point where when I went there, and I went there from 1999 through 2004, and again through 2007 and to 2009. So yes, perpetual student. But when I went there, it's at least at the very beginning in the late 90s, early 2000s, you would get Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Yeah,
off.
Jewish holidays were
Jewish
shut down.
holidays were observed in the university.
Yeah.
And which is unheard of considering it's a technically a publicly funded university.
And my wife, who also went to that school, now says at the time she couldn't walk with anything pro-Israel, anything that visibly identified her as a Jew.
When did she go there?
After you, like significantly after you. She's younger than us.
Right, I'm old.
As am I.
I can tell you that there's always been So recently, the York University Student Union, and I'll call them out exactly by what they ended up doing, which is actually quite disgusting. They got called out by our Minister of Universities and Colleges publicly in the legislature as well, by name, which was kind of refreshing. What they ended up doing is they ended up signing a petition publicly stating that they're in support of Hamas and everything that they've done.
Recently?
Yeah, after October 7th.
Jesus.
And they've publicly stated it. This was York Federation students and York Federation graduate students, so both sides of it. They're basically glorified student unions that I don't know how they were placed there, but they have a very very left point of view, and so they very publicly stated that. And forget the left and right. I mean, this is humanity. Left and right doesn't really matter at this point, but. They stated that they are in publicly stated that they're in support of Hamas and everything that the Hamas has done. And they went as far as putting their signatures on it and identifying themselves who signed this. So the point of this is this has always been there. It's just they ended up, going against the grain, what the public at this point is willing to consider as acceptable. And so they've shown their true colors once again, and they came out and they publicly stated that they're in support of Hamas. They've stated that everything that's been done was within reason, and I'm not going to get into the details of what they ended up signing, but it was disgusting. And finally, for the first time ever, the university administrations were forced to take action. And exactly what action they're going to take is yet to be seen. I would love to see every single one of those individuals expelled from every single university and publicly, advertise their names so that every single employer in the future knows exactly what kind of people that they'll be potentially hiring and what their views are on humanity. Okay. So that's generally what it's been. But look, when I was going to university for, those the early 2000s, there's always been anti-Israel demonstrations, pro-Palestine things going on, and I don't want this whole podcast to be about Palestinian-Israeli conflict, but just generally speaking, there's been always these these booths that were set up and student education that was going on behalf of the Federation of Students and things like that would be teaching the world about what kind of state that Israel is an apartheid state. That what kind of treatment the Palestinians are going through and what they're feeling, and basically, drawing up support for the Palestinian cause, while if there was across from them an Israeli booth in support of Israel, they would be everything from name calling and harassment and things like that would be going towards the Israeli side, and then ultimately Benjamin Netanyahu came to Canada. I want to say this was early 2000s, and Montreal erupted in riots. Concordia, that's right. And to the point where his visit to Montreal was basically essentially canceled, and he was coming to Toronto, and they tried to do the same thing in Toronto. And it was an absolute disaster at York University when that was happening, to the point where when the Israeli side came out to protest in opposition to the Palestinian protests at the university, they started stabbing people. And so they stabbed a couple of Jewish students or a couple of students that were on the Israeli side. Funny how it's always the violence that's being incited, and then it's always one way. Right?
It's always consistent. It's always the same. But what they've done is, via gaslighting and being a step ahead of the narrative, it's like the abuser saying to somebody, "Well, you hit me first." Right? Or, "How can you let me do this to you? There must be a reason about it." And it's ridiculous, and I don't think you have to worry about. I don't want to make this podcast just about that. I think it is something that is near and dear to us. It's a whole different ball game today. Jews are unsafe absolutely everywhere. I've got my flag, and I'll have it up until hopefully this war will end one day. And I see people walking by here and looking at me, looking at the flag in a way that is unkind, if you will. And all I could say to them is, like, I have every right to be here as much as anybody else. You don't like my point of view, that's fine. We live in a free society and democracy, and I will voice my opinion. I have facts, you have facts. But there's only one way to look at this, and that is Jews are not asking for permission to survive anymore. Jews are not asking for permission to coexist. They're not asking for your permission to do fucking anything. You want to win the propaganda war? Fine. It's fine. Nobody's asking for permission to exist.
But that's the thing, though, and let's touch on that real quick. The propaganda war. What we've seen in Makhachkala, and this is my firm opinion of this, is purely propaganda being perpetuated into the real world. And that level of anti-Semitism, that level of hatred, that level of mob mentality that was happening there was 100% perpetuated by the messages that were being shown on state media, on television.
Oh, there's a major incitement by that UFC moron, right? And a couple of them that went out and publicly and they all came out.
Yeah,
he says, what a tough guy. Great for him. Good for you. Try to incite more hate, more violence.
Yeah, but again, all of that hate and violence and all of that. What I'm trying to say is that in the 80s, in 90s, like that wasn't there, and if it was very, very subtle, right? And so now all of a sudden it's being pushed so far up the chain, so far to the forefront of people's minds that they're creating that mob mentality. They're rallying people together and things like that. And a lot of that, I think, is not a lot of it, like 99% of it is media. And how the media in specific regions perpetuates the idea of what is happening in the world. And that's unfortunate.
It is also factual. And we realize how malleable and how simple-minded humans are, and we can make them do just about anything.
Yep.
But what is the craziest part about this is when this started, Jews around the world, including Israel, thought, okay, at least everybody understands what we have been saying the whole time, right, and we will get some sort of, at the very least, empathy for pounding the table. And the stuff that you're seeing on your social media feeds, a bombardment of information, it was a beginning saying, hey, here, we told you, we said this to you. And then it sort of morphed into like, we're no longer trying to prove to you that we were right. This is a warning to the rest of you that Israel and Jews are next, right? And a national call to jihad day on any Jew on the planet. And now it's morphed into like, here's what it is. We're not asking for permission anymore. We know that it's there. The silence of the overall society, whether it's by fear or otherwise, is absolutely deafening.
Yep.
And we're going to do what we're going to do. You've seen more Jewish people now looking for self-defense, arming up. Left-leaning centrists are moving to... again, you're right about left and right, and I don't want to talk about that. It's about survival. Your father's taken down a mezuzah. People are keeping their kids from school. People are now, that would never touch firearms, are now thinking of doing these sorts of things because the government will not protect them. And especially in Canada, I feel much safer here than I would have in Toronto. I would have been very uncomfortable in sending my kids to a private Jewish day school like I did. And in general, I would have had an extra, and I'm not allowed to protect myself there because it's basically against the law. You can't carry. Restricted firearms are no longer really allowed. It's now you've got this mob bully mentality, and you have to play by their rules. So everybody's like, let's keep them quiet. Let's just fucking let them do whatever they want, right? Yep. What do you think about your kids' future? Are you comfortable with sending them to a Canadian university?
It's a hard question to answer right now because, university is pretty far away for her still.
Okay, well then let's backtrack it now. What about high school?
Yeah. I mean, I'd have concerns.
Did you have these concerns 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
No. No. And then, like I said, it's the tension's very, palpable in the city, and you can feel it. It's simple examples are mobile command units, post units by the police set up at Bathurst and Lawrence, and if for anyone that knows Toronto, it's a predominantly Jewish community.
Same with Bathurst and Centre at the promenade.
And Bathurst and Centre. So to the point where I've heard, I mean, I could be wrong, but that's what I heard was the police forces of Toronto, York Region, and I want to say Durham or perhaps around Barrie, essentially joined forces together to share resources so that if there are major issues going on, they're able to really flex really quickly to quell them. And I got to give it to Toronto Police. They've done a fantastic job in terms of the Jewish rallies that were going on to protect the rally in support of Israel, which was the huge one that had thousands of people show up. I felt super safe at that one. Okay,
but you need cops to feel safe.
But that was going to say it because of the very heavy police presence that was going on. Because had that not been there, that rally would have been very, very, very easily turned into a giant brawl. Unfortunately,
going back to your kids.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to ask this differently. I had this conversation with you on the phone. I think just right after I left, because I think some people were a little surprised and shocked. I said to you, "Hey, Taco, would you have considered me successful as a human being?" And I think your answer was, "By every measure that I can account." And I said, "We're leaving all of that, plus the comforts, the family, and everything else in between, and we're starting a new life because something doesn't feel right in Toronto." That was then. When I left, what did you think? Like, I know the guys all kind of had their own sort of opinion, but why did you really, like, your perspective, why did you think I left?
Well, I mean, very simply, opportunities for kids are greater in the U.S. than they are in Canada, and that's when I say opportunities for kids. I mean,
I want you to explain what that means.
I mean, not just being able to go to university. Being able to go to university is great, especially in Canada, because the government gives you this really great loan called OSAP.
If still paying for it?
Yeah, that's I was going to say that there's
but student debt, by the way, in the United States is like exponentially a bigger problem than it is in Canada because the universities are still subsidized by government.
Right. So I was going to say that there's the flip side to that is if you can't afford it and you have to pay out of pocket, that's when it gets really, really expensive. And not rather you can't afford it, but you can afford it, and you can't qualify for OSAP. So that's when the parents need to pay for university, and that's when it starts getting really, really expensive. And I come from immigrant parents, so I was lucky enough to get OSAP before, but I'm quite certain my daughter's not going to be getting that. And it's going to be coming out of pocket. So at the end of the day, it's university costs continue to go up, and ultimately the level and quality of education that you're able to get in the U.S., especially from private colleges, has always been better and stronger.
It's also much more expensive to go to school.
Significantly. That was the flip side of it, right? And but at the end of the day, if you're going to an Ivy League university, and yes, it costs significantly more, the amount of opportunities that come to you from a career standpoint are infinitely greater, and you're able to really progress in your career in terms of the number of employers that there are here, the number of opportunities. I mean, strictly population size is 10 times greater. So there's that much more opportunity. Yes, there's more competition, but there's more opportunity.
So from what I'm understanding, you're thinking that if you had the opportunity to leave, to immigrate into the United States, would you do it?
Yeah, I mean, the thought crossed my mind a few times.
Well, you have constraints, right? And it's not an easy thing to do, and we're not going to get into those constraints unless you want to, but we don't have to do that at all. I think everybody has something. But let's assume that some of those constraints were not weighing you down as much. Would you consider, or would you prefer to move into the United States?
I'd give it a shot.
I'll tell you that it doesn't work like that.
But what I'm saying is I'd give it a shot in terms of look, buying a cup of coffee in Aventura, just
Stop buying Starbucks.
yeah, but what do you mean? Oh, with the union thing, I thought the whole company ended up going back up
Stop
against.
buying Starbucks.
Okay, we'll get into that later. I love Starbucks.
Yeah, so do I. But I love my wife and kids and my people more.
All right. So the example I was going to give was this cup of coffee in Canada costs $3.10 Canadian, which once you convert based on our really terrible exchange rate today, it's call it about 2.25 US. Okay. In Aventura, this cup of coffee, same cup of coffee, costs 5.25 US.
Yeah, it's very expensive.
You know, it's call it 2.5 times more expensive than it is in Canada. So when you say, would you move to the US, that means that especially if it means, Florida or Aventura or wherever this cup of coffee was, it means I need to increase my level of income significantly in order to be able to afford it. And that's a big question mark in my mind is, if you want to move to a safe, predominantly Jewish area in Florida, you need to be ready to really amplify your level of income in order to be able to support the lifestyle that you want to have.
It's dead on right. People think that it's cheaper. It's not. Real estate is still cheaper, quote unquote, but you're not comparing apples to apples.
Right.
But day-to-day expenses, including sending your kids to private Jewish day school, everything is about 2 times more expensive, especially when you factor in exchanges and tax.
Yep.
But your opportunities are 10 times larger. So if you're willing to hustle and if you're willing to do all the things, the American dream is alive and well and kicking here. That sort of like, oh my God, the world is so open to me to do all these incredible things. That doesn't exist in Canada anymore. It's not there. It's gone. And Canada is deteriorating at a clip that is unrecognizable to people, especially over the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not getting into politics of Canada.
There it is. And that's what I'm talking about. Every single Canadian that I talk to, rightfully so, does not want to talk about it.
Yeah, because there is a chance of censorship that's going to happen afterwards, and this is very, very real. I mean,
I'll take it even further than censorship. I think that you can get in real serious trouble. Like Canada is a socialist, communist state.
I mean, communist is pushing it, but socialist for sure.
What's the difference?
Anyway, there's some differences, but yes, and ultimately, it's what you say can and will be used against you. Always. And at the end of the day, our prime minister who, stood up and said, he's in support of Israel and Israel's right to defend itself and things like that. And he's also the same guy that ended up coming out during COVID and telling everyone that they should take CERB and government support payments because, you don't have to worry about it later. Don't worry. We'll figure it out. You don't have to be worried about paying it back and things like that.
And then what happened?
Well, he backtracked on it completely, and CRA has started chasing people about it.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and it's not like I personally took advantage of it, but it was, it's sad to see people that are taking advantage of it because they actually needed to take advantage of it, and without. During COVID, you don't have a lot of proof to show that you needed to take advantage of it outside of the fact that your bank account is empty. Right. So now all of a sudden, years later, the CRA coming back and saying, well, should prove to us that you needed to take this money when the leader of the country was just saying, take it, don't worry, we'll take care of you. Right. So it's bait and switch, and you have a leader that is doing things like that, doesn't stand behind his word in that situation, and leaves the most vulnerable to ultimately feel the pain. What does that say about your leadership?
The perspective that people have in a state like this, when I tell them about Canadian, almost across the board, and like, that guy really ruined a good country, right? And I tell them, you have no idea how bad. Because I'm the perfect example, and there are so many like me that all intensive purposes had no reason to leave. It was such a cool place. It was such a fun place. It was such a safe place. It was a great place to raise kids. It was safe. It was clean. you paid a lot in taxes and all these other things, but you could see the value in what you're spending for because it was amazing. And now what it seems is that the value is non-existent anymore. You're paying all the same amount of taxes and more, and you don't have the same opportunities as you had before. And now you have safety issues, especially as a Jew. And the list goes on and on and on. I could tell you when the podcast started, it was supposed to be like this hobby resource for Canadians coming down, because we were fielding so many phone calls about people wanting to come down every single day now. Last night we had another call. Somebody called and spoke to Francis and I about our journey, what we need to do, and what we think. And I tell them, this is the hardest thing we had to do. It's not for the faint of heart.
Yep.
And it's also the best decision we have made together for our family, because I see what my kids are like here, right? And I see the opportunities and the people that they are around here. And I don't know what the future holds. I mean, there could be political shifts. There could be a lot of other things. But I would rather be here in the Sunshine State and, quote unquote, struggling than being in Toronto, paying all those taxes, freezing my ass off, and worried about my own safety. The damage is done, bro. I think that not enough people are paying attention to what this actually is, this thing between Israel and Hamas. And this is almost like a divide in the world. This is radical Islam against the rest of the world. Because once if Israel I always say that Israel's fighting the war that the rest of the world will have to fight 10 to 20 years down the road. God forbid it doesn't succeed. And that eradicate. And you want a two-state solution, let's do it. There's not a Jew in Gaza, there's not a Jew in the West Bank. It can be done. But until people prove to us that they're no longer looking to murder Jews all across the planet, there will be no peace. And you can only have peace from a position of power, when you are the one that is in control of the narrative and say, I will concede for the sake of the greater good. Not when you're in a position of weakness. And Israel is weak and exposed and is not what we thought it was. And that's partially the problem. I mean, Israel was reborn in 1948 because of what happened in the Holocaust. So Jews had somewhere to go in case something like this happened.
Right.
Well, it's happened. And now we are worried about our kids. We are worried about our future. Our brain space is not what it needs to be. We're wrapped up into social media. It's like nothing I've ever seen in our lifetime. We always had in the back of our heads, but we never really came to fruition. And now it's here, and we realize how many fucking people hate us.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to sound pessimistic, but that's always been the case. And I don't think it's ever going to change. So
I don't think it's going to change. Of course it's not going to change. But that's humanity. There's a huge, giant leap between being, call it maybe a racist, and going out and slaughtering people in cold blood, and then trying to spin the narrative that it was their fucking fault. Oh, we were like, you want to talk about biblical history? You want to talk about any of that stuff? I'm not an expert. Fine, let's go there, right? This has nothing to do with land claims, okay? They keep using words like occupation, Zionists. Zionist is a wonderful, beautiful word. It's the right of return. There is not a Jew in Gaza. There is not a Jew in the West Bank. The only thing that Israel is occupying, in their opinion, is their own land. Their own land. And the Palestinians are a made-up, fabricated group of people that had decided that they own Palestine by a naming convention.
right.
And they could still live together and coexist with Jews if given the opportunity.
Well, that's exactly it. And I think that it's just my own personal opinion. But if there's a world where everyone's given an opportunity to live a good life, and the factors associated with brainwashing people are taken out of that picture, it's going to take a generation that didn't see bloodshed, a generation that saw opportunity, that will eventually grow up to become stronger, better, and more resilient, and will value humanity more than the current state. I think at that point, you're going to see a situation where people are living a little bit more harmoniously. But when there's pain that's fresh in the heart, it's hard to get over it on both sides.
You're a parent. Mm-hmm. Are you worried about things now that you never entered your mind before?
Yeah, of course. But, Lisa, my daughter, she knows, her identity. And she's very proud to be Jewish. And I never tell her otherwise. So I expose her very, lightly to the world events of what's going on, so she's aware of certain things. I don't get into the graphic details of it.
Well, she probably has a phone, right? Or social media.
Yeah, but, as I try to monitor as much as I possibly can.
Right. Throw to the devil, man. Once you go into that loop, all of us. I have been a horrible version of myself since this started, both as a parent, a husband, a business person, because I'm so, I feel like I'm fighting the fight on my end. And in some ways, this podcast is a voice that I have that I want to get out there. But, I mean, kids right now, they're so malleable. We've already formed our thoughts. They still can get, really impressionable. And the Muslim world just outnumbers us, just purely,
Well, that's what I'm trying to say is the role of media, right? That 99% that's being perpetuated in that.
Right. Everybody's a journalist now, right? You can just turn the phone around and there you go.
Exactly. And you have all of these, you have bombardment of opinions, of biased opinions that are being thrown
False
out.
Opinions, unchecked opinions.
Correct. But that is being perpetuated, and that's what I'm saying is the brainwash aspect of it, right? The moment, this is the reality of the world that we live in. And the sad thing is that this perpetuation, this misconception, these lies, this angles that are being brought in that the younger generation is now learning across the world is going to perpetuate more hate, more anti-Semitism, and unfortunately, unless this suddenly stops, the cycle is just going to continue and get worse.
We live in a democracy. I don't know if Canada can be called that anymore. And I say that truthfully, not tongue-in-cheek. But their democracy works essentially at the very lowest level is whoever's got the most votes wins. Mm-hmm. Correct? Mm-hmm. What happens when there's more people voting in the form of wanting to live by Sharia law than the Western world who doesn't agree to that? Democratically, will have more votes.
I mean, there's a I think it was during the Roman times. I think they stated that democracy's ultimate device is its own structure, right? So as you said, as the population's opinions change and go into a certain direction, democracy will eventually vote itself out.
Right. And it's never more evident than it is today. No. And the way I see it is like this. The civilized democratic world has gotten so soft. And I'm not saying that in the form of like a knock. I think that any sort of species, any sort of human, as they've tasted a better life, a less violent life, a more peaceful life, a more prosperous life, our life expectancy has gone up. Our education and technology has gone up. Our learning has gone up. We live a much more peaceful and more calm life. You become softer with each generation. I am softer than my parents were. They are softer than their parents were, and so on and so forth. And we're fortunate to be living in this point in time in the world with all the nastiness that's going on, because we live in a beautiful world where we can do these sorts of things. You can fly airplanes, eat good food, see great medical care.
You can have a podcast with an Israeli flag in the background.
That's right.
That right there is freedom.
Right. I can't do that I now probably say about 90% of the world.
Right.
So we get soft. What has happened within Gaza specifically is Hamas, the terrorist organizations that run that, have treated their own people with such disdain and have hardened them and have always said, you are suffering not because of us, you are suffering because of them. And they've hardened that generation. And you could see that, and they've emboldened that generation. You could see who calculates and thinks that their life is expensive. Mm-hmm. Jewish life is expensive. The Arab life is cheap. And that's what they've done. They made their own people believe that they're worthless, and they found somebody else to point the picture to. And that's an atrocity. There are countries within that neighborhood that live prosperously. We don't get into their politics because that's their way of life, that we're going to normalize and have already normalized and made peace with Israel. And that's what started all this, normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And that's exactly what they want to avoid. And we are screaming at the top of our lungs, and I say we, not just Jews, everybody, saying, this is what we're telling you. And you still think that we're the problem? Right? People are coming around to it, but there's a clear line down the middle where it's now you're either on one side or the other side, or really there's only one side. If tomorrow the majority of the Islamic world, the moderate Islamic world, rise up and say, this is not Islam, this is not what the Quran preaches, this is not who we are, we do not agree with these people, it ends automatically, overnight, without any more bloodshed or a bullet to be shot.
Right. And then we go back to media. Media narrative.
Oh my God, what a part.
Media narrative, everything that's being perpetuated in those parts of the world, should that be changed, this whole thing ends. And anti-Semitism ends.
It would never end. I don't think any.
No, but it would, in the sense of the moment, like you said, you know, when Hamas or any other ruling entity within Gaza or West Bank perpetuates the idea that your life is worthless and
Sure.
and takes away opportunities. You know, they say what Gazan unemployment rate is like 45% or 65%, something crazy.
Well, they pay to slay. They pay for terrorism.
Right.
They pay for that.
Right. But what I'm trying to say is these people don't have opportunity to have a good life and have a prosperous life.
Right.
These people, all of their opportunity lies in, killing themselves or doing things for Hamas or things like that and I don't live there. I don't know it firsthand. I know it as much as I educated myself on the subject. Right. But if you take that cancer out and you give those people the opportunity to live, you give those people the opportunity to look forward to tomorrow, and you take away the brainwashing that is happening on a daily basis.
Which will take generations, like you stated.
Yeah. And generation or two later, okay, you're going to have a situation where people are happy to live. They look forward to tomorrow, and they live peacefully with each other.
And this is, I think, the message that is being lost. The exact statement you just made. The only thing I will add to that is, like, Gaza and the money funneled into Gaza via multiple countries has been stolen by the dictatorship who is living outside of Gaza.
In Qatar.
The most lavish lifestyle we can ever imagine, and has realized psychologically that they can manipulate such an amazing group of people. And when I say amazing, like, they're just as capable of you and I and anybody else.
Sure.
Just like we can be the other way around, but has turned them into serial murderers by generation that are openly happy to murder. And now you've got, on top of that, you've got a leadership that is prospering from this. Why would they ever turn the tap off of this sort of violence? It works so well for the select few.
Right, but that's the dictatorship 101, right? You're getting all the money and you're using all the population as your pawns to accomplish your ultimate goal.
You know what I think is so infuriating is everybody, including Gazans and the entire Muslim world and everybody else, recognizes this, sees this, will behind closed doors agree to this because it's there. It's in black and white. You can't, like, this is undeniable. There's billionaires that don't have any real businesses, but somehow they got all these billions of dollars. So they didn't create anything, but they're billionaires. And everybody knows this, but they're like, you know what? Fuck it. We hate Jews more. So, you know what? Even though these guys are stealing, they are resistance. They are a fighting force, resisting. The only thing they're fucking resisting is a day of work, of creating something. Right? They're not resisting Israel. Israel became soft. We as a human beings, we become soft because we want to organically live a better life. We're not looking to take up arms and fight and dig into tunnels.
Yeah. It sucks, frankly, and it's unfortunate. And I hope one day none of this is going to be, real. But like I said, sad reality is Jews have always been persecuted throughout history.
What's your prediction in the short term? 30 days from today, what do you think will happen?
The Gaza incursion is going to go through. They're going to go through and try to rescue the hostages. There's going to be some sort of deal that ultimately will come out. And
what does that look like?
It's one-sided for sure.
What does that mean?
Hopefully, and I truly mean that, none of the hostages are harmed.
That's not impossible.
Right.
The damage has been done.
Right. But what I'm saying is they're brought back alive.
Okay.
And ultimately, this is going to be a 10-to-1, 100-to-1 kind of exchange where, those hostages that are going to come home, they're going to trigger a release of these, rightfully imprisoned individuals in Israel that are going to be released back into Gaza. That will perpetuate this whole cycle all over again. It's going to take years. And ultimately, we're going to be back at square one.
I want to fight agreeing with you. I don't agree with you. But, I mean, this is just pure speculation, so it's
totally.
okay.
100%.
I think the battle is understated grossly, and you will see psychological warfare. You'll see on the ground warfare like you have never seen before, and there will be only one end and you will know the direction of this war, of how it's going, is how bad it gets outside of Israel on the streets, and you can start to see it now. The ceasefire calls, the conversations that are now being had, the hostage video that was just released where the Israeli hostages are screaming at Israel and saying this is your fault and all this sort of stuff. I think that Hamas was anticipating a much bigger backlash for the hostages within. I think they were expecting a lot more support from Hezbollah. Mm-hmm. And I think that they went in there on a suicide mission that they'd never anticipated to go this successfully for them. And I hate to use that word, successfully. And they're in a territory that's uncharted. And the only leg they still have to stand on is the violence that will incur outside of Israel's walls to try to apply pressure worldwide to save the diaspora. Mm-hmm. And I believe that tearing down your mezuzah and not being prepared to fight, not standing up for is our front that needs to be fought. And the longer this war goes, this has never gone this long for them, the more Israel will apply pressure on Hamas and the rest of the world, because the leadership outside will no longer be living as comfortably living in Qatar and those places. I think there will likely end up being some sort of extremely high-level assassination, and then the riots will erupt everywhere. Mm-hmm. And that will bring about a conversation of a disarmed Hamas, which cannot be trusted. And we will be back to square one with a much longer, call it, peacetime. That's my prediction of things, at least. But in a perfect world, they will take them out by the scruff of their neck, and do exactly what you said and allow Gazans to re-enjoy life. I think the people that need to be protected right now is not necessarily Israel. I think Israel needs to go in and protect the Gazans that want to go into safer places, that want to relocate to other locations, and allow them to rebuild and come back home and rebuild in a way that allows them to create economies thrive,
Right.
do all these things. And this entire thing, nobody's talking about the border with Egypt, where, where aren't they helping them out and trying to coexist with them because they know what they would be bringing in.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to. This is Israel's problem.
This is everybody's problem. This is Israel's problem for now, and that's why a lot of people sit quiet and silently, and there are people cheering for them, but for fear and reprisal. The stuff that you're seeing right now in Makhachkala is not, like I've said, it's not just Jews. It's a warning to the rest of the world that if you do not side with us, here's what's going to happen to you. So if you don't have a horse in this race, you don't have a dog in this fight, why would you ever endanger yourself? And this is what people don't understand. This is psychological warfare at its finest, perpetuated via media. And I don't say mainstream media because I think they're like 2 days behind in the info. Right. You want to know what's really going on, check your WhatsApps and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and you'll get the information way faster than you would on mainstream. But what you are seeing is nothing to do with Jews at this point. It's a fucking warning to everybody else. It's like, there's a lot of us. We're pretty fucking fanatical. You step out of line, here's what's going to happen. And this is what people are not cluing into. And I wish that message would resonate with the rest of the world real quick and in a hurry. This is not an Israel problem. This is an everybody problem. Taco, I will say, and there's a reason I call him Taco. I've called him Taco since high school. Taco almost won the student council presidentship in our high school because of that name alone. He's one of the sweetest, kindest, smartest guys I've ever met. His real name is Daniel Abramov. He is, even though we have some distance, we still talk. I mean, we pick up right where we left off because life gets in the way. I have a vested interest in trying to get as many of you guys all to come back down here, or come here, not back, because I think that Toronto's in trouble and we want like-minded people here. I'm still kind of communicating with them vis-a-vis these podcasts, but dude, there will be a better day. We need to all be strong.
Yep.
We need to stand up. The fight's coming to our doors. And I love you, dude.
Love you too. This is great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Talk to you.